Welcome to the Boardroom. On our show today, the struggles continue for the football team, losing their third straight game after falling to Rutgers. And we'll take a look back at what was a tumultuous week for the athletic department, whose jobs are safe and who's on the way out. Finally, the Michigan hockey team is back in action and hitting the ice in stride. Thanks for watching. I'm Simon Kaufman, and today I'm joined by Zach Shaw, a hockey beat writer, and Alexa Dettelbach, a senior sports editor and football beat writer here at the Daily. Let's start with football. Another loss, this time on the road against Rutgers. Loss aside, what was your biggest takeaways from this one?
You know, my biggest takeaway from this would be the defense. They've been the only thing really worth watching and rooting for this whole season, and they just came out flat. And it was the first time that the offense looked good, and the defense led up for over 400 yards of offense in the air and on the ground, and it was just a mess.
Yeah, and I think in their three losses previously, they'd been outscored in the second half 43-7. So it was a little bit encouraging for fans to see a team that didn't give up. You saw Devin Gardner with a couple drives there in the fourth quarter, keeping Michigan in the game. Obviously, they came up short in the end based on a blocked field goal and some questionable calls, but they were in the game the entire time. But as you mentioned, the defense, the secondary continues to look thin. As soon as one or two players go down with injury, it just seems like they'll give up big play after big play. So that's something that they're still working on, obviously, but it's pretty alarming at this point that halfway through the season, the secondary is still as thin as they are.
And I would also say the team's run blocking really improved. They're running the ball much better, and I know Derek Green went out, but you know, Davion Smith and Justice Hayes, it's the next man up, and Devin Gardner ran for 2 touchdowns. So they're definitely running the ball better.
Looking ahead to the rest of the season, obviously Michigan would need to do something incredible to make a bowl. As it stands right now, what are this team's bowl's chances?
They're pretty slim. They're almost slim to none. I would be shocked if they made a bowl. Obviously, they'll be the favorites against Maryland and against Northwestern and against some of these other teams, but they're going to have to either beat Penn State, Michigan State, or Ohio State. The latter of those two are on the road against very formidable teams that continue to develop. Ohio State seems to be getting better every week. Michigan State looks like they're going to work their way back into the playoff picture. So it's going to be very, very tough for Michigan football to turn it around and win 4 of the next 6 games, and personally, I don't think they're going to do it.
I would agree with that. I think it really also comes down to this weekend. If they can beat Penn State, then their bowl chances are still out there. Then they don't have to beat Michigan State, they don't have to beat Ohio State, and then they'd be playing bottom feeders in the Big Ten. But it really comes down to this weekend.
Obviously, this hurt against Rutgers hurt a little more because it topped off what was just a horrible week for the athletic department dealing with the Shane Morris fiasco. Looking ahead to the following season for a moment, September 3rd, 2015, the Wolverines will kick off that season against Utah. In that game in Salt Lake City, who's the head coach and who's in charge of the athletic department at that time?
I think Dave Brandon will still have that job. He's done too much for the program. It goes beyond what happened the last couple weeks. It goes beyond Coatgate. It goes beyond the concussion issues. It's a bottom line business, and he's brought a lot of money into the athletic department, and he's done a lot for the small sports. But in terms of coaching, I don't see Brady Hoke surviving this season. I think that the names that they throw around are the Harbaugh brothers. Jim's having issues in San Francisco. John's having issues with how this organization handled the Ray Rice situation. So those are 2 names that we've been throwing around for years. And I would also say Les Miles. His name's been thrown around for over a decade at this point. But he's having success at LSU, and I just don't see why he'd want to leave.
I do think Les Miles will be the head coach next year. I think the Harbaugh brothers, they have options in the NFL. Both of them have been critical in the past of the way Michigan football is being run. But I think Les Miles, he said in June, he would be interested in the job. He's 61 now, approaching kind of the final step of his career. He's struggling in a very, very competitive SEC West division. And so people aren't calling for his head because he's still holding his own. But I do think that Michigan, there's a lot of pressure on them to get this next hire right, no matter who it is. There's a lot of pressure. So I don't think that they're going to hold back incentive-wise. I think they'll bring out the big bucks and they'll make Les Miles one of the highest paid coaches in the country. As far as the athletic director goes, I agree. I think it's going to be Dave Brandon still. I think he generates a lot of money. The donors love him. I think a lot of people really like the program that he's built, and I think despite the recent events, I still think, as far as an athletic director goes, he's numerically doing his job. He's objectively doing what he's supposed to do, and I think he still contributes a lot of money to the university itself, and so I don't think there's really too much reason to fire him at this point.
Wouldn't that be something if John Harbaugh came here, going from the Ravens PR mess to the Michigan PR mess? But enough about football. The Michigan hockey team kicked off their season on Friday night against Ferris State. They dropped that game, and they're looking to get back in the tournament this year after missing it for the last 2 years, after being there every year for 22 years. Zach, I'll start with you. You're covering the team this year. Just give us a brief rundown. What should we know about this team this year?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the biggest disappointment over the past 2 years was them not making the tournament, because from a talent standpoint, they were among the top 10 teams in the country. They had a bit of issues with goalies. They had some issues with their defense. And so this year, the defense is still a little bit of a question mark. They have a lot of new faces. There's a little bit less experience than in the past. But the goalies is something Michigan coach Red Berenson is really confident in. He's confident in both Steve Racine and Zach Nagelvort. They've competed for the job last year, but now they have a whole nother year under their belt. So far, they've been looking pretty solid. The defense is still questionable. There's still some turnovers both in the Ferris State game and against the United States National Development Team. But the offense is going to score. The offense is going to be there, returning their top 2 scorers from last year, junior Andrew Kopp and sophomore JT Comfer. Freshman Dylan Larkin, who was drafted by the Red Wings in the first round, he's been solid so far. He had 2 goals in the exhibition on Monday. And so I think the offense will be there, and if the defense can develop, there's no reason they shouldn't contend for the Frozen Four and the Big Ten title.
You mentioned a couple of the freshmen. This is a young team. They boast a lot of youngins on the team. Is this a team that's going to be able to compete going into the second year of Big Ten Conference, or is there going to be a learning curve at the beginning of the season with all these freshmen?
I think there'll be a little bit of learning curve, but talking to Red, he's not going to play someone who isn't ready. They have a pretty deep team as far as sophomores and juniors that are still around. They have a lot of guys who were on the team last year, and so he'll work the freshmen in as it goes. They have a pretty favorable schedule with a lot of home games early on, but I do think that they'll be ready come Big Ten play.
Alexa?
And their offense is, they're a lot more experienced in the defense. So with Red kind of at the helm, I really think that this team can put goals, score some goals and get some wins early on.
All right, thank you. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Boardroom. Make sure to join us each week as we break down Michigan sports. Check out the Daily in print Monday through Friday and every day online at michigandaily.com. Cheers.